The grand hall of the imperial palace stretched higher than any building Jake Morrison had ever seen on Earth. Crystal columns rose toward a ceiling that seemed to touch the clouds, and thousands of guests from across the galaxy filled the space with color and sound. Jake stood at the altar, in his formal diplomatic uniform, waiting for his bride. He had never imagined his life would lead to this moment. Just 2 years ago, he had been ready to retire from military service and live quietly, somewhere peaceful. Then the diplomatic corps had recruited him, saying they needed someone who understood both combat and compassion. Someone who could build bridges instead of burning them. Now he was about to marry an alien princess he had met only 3 times before. The music changed, and Princess Lyria appeared at the far end of the hall. She was beautiful, even by the standards of her own people. Her skin had a faint silver shimmer, and her eyes were the color of amethyst. She wore traditional Valerian wedding robes that flowed like water as she walked. Her face showed no emotion as she approached him. Jake had learned enough about Valerian culture to know that showing emotion at a royal wedding was considered improper. Still, he wished she would at least look at him. During their 3 brief meetings, she had barely spoken to him. When she did, her tone was polite but cold, like someone speaking to a useful tool. The ceremony began. The emperor himself conducted the ritual, speaking in the old Valerian language that Jake had been studying for months. He understood most of it now. On, the words spoke of duty, honor, and the joining of 2 peoples. When it came time for Jake to speak his vows, he did so in Valerian. He had practiced for weeks to get the accent right. A murmur went through the crowd. Several Valerian nobles looked surprised that a human could speak their language so well. Lyria's expression remained neutral, but Jake thought he saw her eyebrow twitch slightly. That was something, at least. After the ceremony, the celebration lasted for hours. Jake stood beside Lyria as hundreds of guests approached to offer congratulations. Most of the Valerians were polite to his face, but he caught the looks they gave each other. He saw the barely hidden smirks, the knowing glances. He was human, after all. His species had only achieved faster-than-light travel 30 years ago. The Valerians had been exploring the stars for thousands of years. To them, humans were children playing with toys they barely understood. During a quiet moment, 2 of Lyria's sisters approached. Princess Kessa was tall and sharp-featured, while Princess Thora had a warrior's build and carried herself like a soldier. "Sister," Kessa said, her voice sweet as poison. "What a lovely ceremony. So intimate." "Yes," Thora added. "Who would have thought you would be the first of us to marry? And to such an interesting choice." Lyria's face remained calm. "The Emperor commanded it. I serve the Empire." "Oh, way." Lyria's face. "Wace." "Of course," Kessa said. She looked at Jake with barely disguised contempt. "Tell me, human, how does it feel to marry so far above your station?" Jake smiled politely. "I'm honored to serve the cause of peace between our peoples, Your Highness." Kessa laughed. "How diplomatic. I suppose that's all your kind can offer. Diplomacy and clever words." She leaned closer. "You do know that Valerian marriages last for life? Your life, I mean. Which won't be very long compared to ours." "Kessa," Lyria said sharply. "That's enough." Her sister smiled and walked away, Thora following behind her. Jake watched them go, his expression unchanged. "You should not have to endure such insults," Lyria said quietly. It was the first time she had spoken directly to him all day. "My sisters forget themselves." "It's all right," Jake said. "I understand that this arrangement is difficult for everyone." Lyria looked at him properly for the first time. Her purple eyes studied his face, as if trying to solve a puzzle. "You are very patient," she said. "Is that a human trait? Or just yours?" "A bit of both, I think." She turned away. "We should continue greeting the guests." The celebration eventually ended, and Jake found himself in the rooms that had been prepared for him in the palace. They were beautiful, decorated in both human and Valerian styles. Through a connecting door, he could see Lyria's quarters, even more grand than his own. She had made it clear, during their brief meetings, that this would be a political marriage only. They would have separate rooms, separate lives. They would appear together at official functions, but otherwise, they would not interfere with each other. Jake was fine with that. He hadn't expected love, or even friendship. He had accepted this role because he believed in the treaty. Humanity and the Valerian Empire had been close to war for years. This marriage was a symbol that peace was possible. He changed out of his formal uniform and sat on the edge of his bed, feeling the weight of the day settle on his shoulders. Through the window, he could see the lights of the capital city spreading out below. Somewhere out there, the other humans in the diplomatic mission were probably celebrating. He should feel happy. He had done his duty. Instead, he felt very alone. A soft knock came at his door. He opened it to find Amy Chen, the cultural attaché who had become his closest friend during the negotiations. "Hey," she said. "Thought you might want some company. Or at least some earth coffee. I smuggled some through customs." Jake smiled, genuinely this time. "You're a lifesaver." They sat on the balcony, drinking coffee and looking at the alien stars. Amy didn't ask if he was okay. She knew him well enough to know he wouldn't answer honestly anyway. "The nobles are already betting on how long the marriage will last," she said. "Most give it a year before you request a transfer back to Earth. I won't do that." "I know." She sipped her coffee. "Jake, can I ask you something? Why did you really volunteer for this? You could have said no." Jake was quiet for a long moment. "Because I've seen what war does," he said finally. "I've seen planets burning, and cities reduced to ash. If marrying a princess who can't stand me prevents that, it's the easiest duty I've ever had." Amy nodded. She knew about his past, about the things he had seen and done before becoming a diplomat. Most people didn't. Jake preferred it that way. "Well," she said, standing up, "try to get some sleep. Tomorrow you start your new life as a prince consort. Which, by the way, sounds ridiculous when I say it out loud." After she left, Jake stood alone on the balcony. Through the connecting door, he could hear Lyria moving around in her rooms. She was probably as uncomfortable with this situation as he was. He hoped that eventually they could at least become friends. He didn't need her to love him, but mutual respect would make the years ahead much easier. In her own rooms, Lyria sat at her desk, reviewing reports. She refused to think about the human in the next room, about the strange patience he had shown in the face of her sister's mockery. She refused to wonder why he had learned her language so perfectly, or why his smile never quite reached his eyes. He was a diplomatic necessity, nothing more. She would do her duty to the Empire, and he would do his. That was all there was to it. 3 months had passed since the wedding, and Jake had settled into a routine. Every morning, he woke before dawn and spent an hour in the palace gym. Then he studied Valerian history and law until breakfast. After that, he attended whatever meetings or ceremonies required his presence as the prince consort. Lyria had her own schedule, and their paths rarely crossed except at official events. When they did meet, she was polite but distant. She treated him like a colleague, not a husband. Jake was fine with that arrangement. What surprised him was how much he enjoyed learning about Valerian culture. Their history went back thousands of years, filled with wars and peace treaties, brilliant artists, and cunning politicians. The more he learned, the more he understood why they looked down on humans. To them, humanity was barely past the cradle stage. The palace servants had warmed to him, at least. He always thanked them by name, asked about their families, and never demanded anything he could do himself. This was apparently unusual behavior for royalty. One afternoon, Jake was in the library when he heard raised voices. He looked up from his book to see Lord Corthan, a powerful, noble, arguing with one of the human diplomats. "Your presence here is a stain on the empire," Corthan was saying. "The emperor should never have allowed this farce of a marriage." The diplomat, a young man named Peter Grant, looked uncomfortable. "My lord, the treaty benefits both our peoples." "Benefits?" Corthan laughed. "You bring nothing to this alliance except your absurd luck in stumbling onto faster-than-light travel. In another century, you'll destroy yourselves, and we'll be free of you." Jake closed his book and stood up. "Lord Corthan," he said calmly, "I wonder if you've read the human philosopher Marcus Aurelius. He wrote that the best revenge is to not be like your enemy. Perhaps we could discuss philosophy instead of politics?" Corthan turned to him, his eyes cold. "The human prince, tell me, do you truly believe you belong here? That you're worthy of a princess of the blood?" "I believe I'm doing my duty," Jake said, "just as Princess Lyria is doing hers. Whether I'm worthy or not isn't for me to decide." "How diplomatic," Corthan sneered. "But diplomacy is just cowardice, wearing fancy clothes. A real warrior would defend his honor." Jake smiled slightly. "My honor doesn't need defending, Lord Corthan. It exists, whether you acknowledge it or not." For a moment, Corthan looked like he might strike Jake. Then he seemed to remember where they were and who might be watching. "Enjoy your time in the palace, human. It won't last forever." He turned and walked away. Peter let out a breath. "Thank you, sir. I didn't know what to say to him." "Don't worry about it," Jake said. "Some people need to feel superior. Let them have it." That evening, there was a state dinner. Jake sat beside Lyria at the high table, watching the nobles and dignitaries eat and drink. The Valerian food was rich and strange, but he had learned to enjoy most of it. Lord Corthan was there, seated near the emperor. During the meal, he began telling stories about great Valerian warriors, each tale emphasizing courage and strength. It was clearly aimed at making the humans at the table feel inadequate. When he finished his latest story, he turned to Jake. "Tell me, Prince Consort, do humans have any warriors worth mentioning? Or do you prefer to hide behind your machines?" 2. No. The table grew quiet. Jake took a sip of his wine, considering his response. "We have many brave soldiers," he said. "But I've always thought that the best warriors are the ones who choose when to fight. It takes more courage to build peace than to make war." "A pretty speech," Corthan said, "but spoken like someone who has never been tested in battle." Jake's expression didn't change, but Lyria noticed his hand tighten slightly on his wine glass. Then, he relaxed and smiled. "You may be right, my lord. I'm just a diplomat, after all." Lyria frowned. Something about his response bothered her, though she couldn't say why. She had seen Jake handle insults and mockery for 3 months now, always with the same patient smile. Never angry, never defending himself too strongly. She had assumed it was weakness. But looking at him now, she wondered if there was something else going on beneath that calm surface. After dinner, she found herself walking with him back toward their quarters. It was late, and most of the palace had gone quiet. "You let them mock you," she said abruptly. Jake looked at her, surprised. It was the first time she had initiated a conversation with him. "It doesn't bother me. It should. You're married to a princess. Their insults reflect on me as well." "I'm sorry," Jake said. "I don't mean to embarrass you. I just don't see the point in arguing with people who've already made up their minds." They walked in silence for a moment. Lyria found herself studying him from the corner of her eye. He was tall for a human, though still shorter than most Valerians. His movements were relaxed, almost lazy. Nothing about him suggested any kind of threat. And yet, "Why did you become a diplomat?" she asked. "What did you do before?" "I was in the military," Jake said. "Special operations. But I got tired of it and wanted to do something different." "Special operations," Lyria repeated. "What does that mean?" "Difficult missions. Rescue operations. That sort of thing." He shrugged. It was a long time ago. They reached the corridor where their rooms were located. Lyria paused at her door. Jake, she said, using his name for the first time since the wedding. When Corthan challenged you about being tested in battle, why didn't you tell him about your military service? Jake was quiet for a moment. Because it wouldn't have changed his mind. And because I came here to build peace. Not to prove how dangerous I can be. He said goodnight and went to his own room, leaving Lyria standing in the hallway. She went inside, troubled by thoughts she couldn't quite organize. The next day, she was training in the palace combat hall when her guard commander, Drex, approached. He was massive, even by Valerian standards. A veteran of a dozen campaigns. Princess, he said, I have been watching the human. Jake? Why? Because he spends an hour each morning in the gym, Drex said. I decided to observe him today. His training routine is unusual. Unusual how? He practices combat forms, Drex said. Human styles, but also some I recognize from other species, including ours. His movements are precise, controlled. He trains like someone who has used those skills in real combat. Lyria frowned. He said he was in their military. Yes. But the way he moves, Princess, he was not some ordinary soldier. That man has killed before, many times. I would stake my reputation on it. After Drex left, Lyria couldn't stop thinking about what he had said. That night, she did something she had never done before. She knocked on the connecting door between their rooms. Jake answered, looking surprised. He was dressed casually, reading on his tablet. Is everything all right? He asked. I wanted to ask you something, Lyria said. And I want an honest answer. Of course. You said you were in special operations. What exactly did you do? Jake's expression didn't change. But something shifted in his eyes. I did what was necessary to protect my people. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give, Jake said gently. I'm here to help build peace between our peoples. The rest doesn't matter. Lyria studied his face, looking for any sign of deception. She found none, but she also found no warmth, no opening. He was like a door that appeared unlocked, but wouldn't actually open. Very well, she said finally. Good night, Jake. Good night, Lyria. As she lay in bed that night, Lyria realized something that disturbed her. For 3 months, she had believed she understood the human she had married. He was patient, polite, educated, and weak. A perfect diplomatic tool, nothing more. But now she wondered if she had been seeing only what he wanted her to see. And if that was true, what else was he hiding behind that gentle smile? The invitation to the hunting expedition arrived a week later. It was from Prince Vaxar, Lyria's cousin, who controlled the military outpost on Krell, one of the moons orbiting the Valerian homeworld. The hunt was a traditional event, held every year to honor the old warrior customs. Lyria accepted immediately. She enjoyed the hunt and was skilled with both bow and rifle. Jake was also invited, as was proper for the prince consort. You don't have to come, Lyria told him. These hunts can be dangerous. The Krell stalkers are apex predators. I'd like to come, Jake said. I should learn about Valerian traditions. Amy Chen was less enthusiastic when Jake told her. They were having coffee in his rooms, and she nearly spilled hers when he mentioned the hunt. Are you insane? She said. Prince Vaxar hates humans. Everyone knows it. This is a setup. Probably, Jake agreed. But I can't refuse without causing a diplomatic incident. You could get killed. I'll be careful. Amy shook her head. You're too calm about this. It's creepy. Jake smiled. Trust me, Amy. I've been in worse situations. The hunting party assembled on Krell 3 days later. The moon was beautiful in a harsh way, all rocky cliffs and dense forests. The air was thinner than on the Valerian homeworld, and Jake could feel it in his lungs. Prince Vaxar greeted them at the lodge. He was younger than Lyria, broad-shouldered and handsome, with the easy confidence of someone who had never been challenged. His eyes lingered on Jake with obvious contempt. "Welcome, cousin," he said to Lyria. "And welcome to your husband." He said the word, like it tasted bad. "I hope he can keep up. The stalkers are particularly aggressive this season." "I'll do my best," Jake said mildly. The hunting party included a dozen Valerian nobles, along with Kyle Harper, a human security officer who had insisted on coming. Kyle was young and nervous, clearly uncomfortable around so many Valerians. They set out into the forest at dawn. Valerians hunted with traditional weapons, long spears, and powerful bows. Jake carried a borrowed spear, feeling its weight and balance. It was well made, though clearly chosen to be too heavy for a human. The Krell stalkers were enormous creatures, 3 meters tall with 6 legs and armored hides. They hunted in packs and could move through the forest almost silently, despite their size. Killing one was considered a great honor. For the first few hours, the hunt went normally. They tracked a pack through the dense undergrowth, moving quietly. Jake noticed that Vaxar kept positioning him at the most exposed points, places where a stalker attack would hit him first. He didn't complain. He simply stayed alert and kept moving. Around midday, they found fresh tracks. The pack was close. Vaxar split the group, sending Jake and Kyle with 2 Valerian hunters to circle around and drive the stalkers toward the main party. "Try not to die, human," Vaxar said with a smile. "It would be such a waste of my cousin's time." They moved through the forest, following the tracks. One of the Valerian hunters, a woman named Celis, kept glancing at Jake. "You move quietly for a human," she said. "Have you hunted before?" "A little," Jake said. "Different prey, different world, but the principles are the same." They found the stalkers in a clearing, a pack of 5 adults. Beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The plan was to make noise and drive them toward Vaxar's position, but something went wrong. One of the stalkers broke away from the pack, moving faster than Jake expected. It charged directly at Kyle, who froze in panic. Jake moved without thinking, pushing Kyle aside and rolling away from the creature's massive claws. "Run!" he shouted. "Back to the others." The Valerian hunters fired their bows, but the stalker's hide was too thick. The arrows bounced off. Kyle scrambled backward, and Celis grabbed him, pulling him toward safety. Jake faced the stalker with just his spear. The creature was enormous, its breath hot and rank. It circled him, intelligent eyes studying this small prey that hadn't run. Jake's grip on the spear was relaxed, his stance loose. He wasn't holding the weapon like an amateur anymore. Lyria, who had heard the commotion and run toward them, arrived just in time to see the stalker charge. What happened next was almost too fast to follow. Jake didn't try to meet the charge head-on. Instead, he sidestepped at the last moment, moving with a speed and precision that seemed impossible. The spear flashed out, finding a gap in the armor at the creature's shoulder joint. The stalker roared and spun, but Jake had already moved again, staying just out of reach. It wasn't the clumsy desperation of someone fighting for their life. It was controlled, calculated. The movements of someone who had fought much worse things than a Krell stalker. The creature charged again. This time, Jake used its own momentum against it, planting the spear and letting the stalker impale itself. It died quickly, crashing to the ground. Jake pulled the spear free and turned to check on Kyle, his breathing steady. Then, he saw Lyria watching him, her expression shocked. "Are you all right?" he asked, as calm as if he had just finished a morning walk. Before Lyria could answer, Vaxar arrived with the rest of the hunting party. He took in the scene, the dead stalker, Jake standing unhurt. "Well," Vaxar said, "it seems the human has some luck after all." "That wasn't luck," Lyria said quietly. The hunt continued, but the mood had changed. Lyria kept watching Jake, seeing him differently now. The way he moved through the forest, the way he constantly scanned for threats. This wasn't a diplomat pretending to be comfortable in the wilderness. This was someone in his element. That evening, they made camp. Vaxar had been drinking heavily, and his mood had turned ugly. He kept making comments about human weakness, human cowardice. Kyle, who had been shaken by the stalker attack, finally snapped back at one of the insults. Vaxar stood up, towering over the young human. "You want to challenge me, little man?" he said. Vaxar, "Enough," Lyria said. He meant no offense. "He exists," Vaxar said. "That's offense enough." He grabbed Kyle's arm, squeezing hard enough to make the young man gasp in pain. "You come to our world, marry our women, and think you're our equals. You're nothing but clever apes." "Let him go," Jake said. His voice was still quiet, but something in it made everyone turn to look at him. Vaxar smiled. "I'm asking you politely," Jake said. "Let him go, and we can all enjoy the evening. And if I don't?" Jake stood up slowly. "Then I'll stop being polite." For a moment, the camp was completely silent. Vaxar was staring at Jake, and for the first time, he seemed to really see him. Whatever he saw made him hesitate. Then he laughed and pushed Kyle away. "Not worth the trouble," he said. "The boy isn't worth breaking the treaty over." But Lyria had seen Vaxar's face in that moment before he laughed. She had seen something she had never seen before. Her cousin had been afraid. That night, as they prepared to sleep, Lyria approached Jake at the edge of camp. He was sitting alone, looking at the stars. "What you did today," she said. "The way you fought the stalker." "No," Jake agreed. "It wasn't. How many have you killed? Not stalkers. People." Jake was quiet for a long time. "Enough," he said finally. "More than enough." "Why didn't you fight Vaxar? He was hurting Kyle." "Because Kyle wasn't in real danger," Jake said. "Just pain and humiliation. If Vaxar had tried to seriously hurt him, I would have stopped it. But creating an incident over an insult isn't worth it." "You're always so controlled," Lyria said. "Doesn't anything make you angry?" Jake turned to look at her. And for just a moment, she saw something dark and fierce in his eyes. Then it was gone, hidden behind that gentle expression again. "Many things make me angry, Lyria," he said softly. "I just choose not to show it. Anger makes you stupid, and stupidity gets people killed. Is that why you became a diplomat? To avoid violence? I became a diplomat because I got tired of violence. There's a difference." He stood up. "You should get some rest. We have a long trip back tomorrow." As he walked away, Lyria realized that she had been completely wrong about the man she had married. He wasn't weak or harmless. He was something much more dangerous than that. He was someone who had learned to control what others couldn't. The weeks following the hunt were strange for Lyria. She found herself watching Jake more closely, noticing things she had missed before. The way he moved through the palace with complete awareness of his surroundings. The way his eyes constantly tracked people and exits. The way he smiled and laughed with courtiers, while his hands stayed relaxed and ready. He was still patient and diplomatic. He still let nobles insult him without response. But now, she understood. It wasn't weakness. It was choice. She also noticed that they had started talking more. Real conversations. Not just the polite exchanges required by their positions. He would ask her about Valerian history, and she found herself enjoying his questions. He saw connections that other scholars missed. Understood implications that took her people years to grasp. One evening, they were having dinner in her rooms, something that had become a weekly habit. Jake was telling her about Earth's oceans, which fascinated her. "I'd like to see them someday," she said. "Your world sounds beautiful." "It is," Jake said. "Different from here. But beautiful. Maybe when things are more stable, we could visit." Lyria smiled at the thought. Then she noticed Jake had gone very still. His attention focused on something outside the window. "What is it?" she asked. "I'm not sure," he said quietly. "The guard rotation just changed 20 minutes early, and there are too many soldiers in the courtyard." Before Lyria could respond, an explosion rocked the palace. The window shattered, and Jake was moving instantly, pulling her down and shielding her with his body. "Stay down," he said. More explosions. Alarms began to wail. Jake's comm device activated. It was Amy's voice, tense and frightened. "Jake, we're under attack. Armed insurgents in the throne room. The Emperor and Empress are secure, but there are casualties." "Copy that," Jake said, his voice completely different now, hard and focused. "Stay in the embassy quarters. Lock down, and don't come out for anyone but me or palace security. Understood?" "Understood. Jake, be careful." He was already moving, checking the door to the hallway. "Lyria, is there a secure room in your quarters?" "Yes, the inner chamber. It's reinforced. Go there now. Lock the door, and don't open it for anyone but me or your father's personal guard." "What are you going to do?" "Make sure you're safe." He handed her a small device. "This is a human emergency beacon. If I don't come back within an hour, activate it. Our ship in orbit will send help." "Jake." An explosion closer this time. Smoke was beginning to fill the corridor outside. "Go. Now." Lyria ran to the inner chamber, but she didn't lock the door completely. Through the crack, she watched Jake move through her rooms with deadly efficiency. He found one of her ceremonial swords, tested its weight, and nodded in satisfaction. Then soldiers burst through the main door. Not palace guards, insurgents wearing unmarked armor. 3 of them. What happened next would stay with Lyria for the rest of her life. Jake moved like water, like death itself. The first soldier barely had time to raise his weapon before the sword took him in the throat. The second managed to fire, but Jake had already moved, the shot missing by inches. The blade flashed again, and the soldier fell. The third was smarter. He dropped his rifle and drew a knife, engaging Jake in close combat. They fought for perhaps 30 seconds, though it felt like forever. To Lyria, the soldier was skilled, trained in Valerian military techniques. Jake was better. When it was over, Jake stood among the bodies, breathing slightly harder, but otherwise unharmed. He wiped the sword clean and moved to check the corridor. Lyria emerged from the inner chamber, her legs shaking. "You killed them." "Yes," Jake said simply. "Stay behind me." They moved through the palace, and everywhere there were signs of fighting. Some insurgents, some palace guards. Jake avoided conflict when possible, but when they encountered more insurgents, he dealt with them with the same cold efficiency. They reached the throne room to find it secured by loyal forces. The Emperor and Empress were alive but shaken. Lord Corthan lay dead, killed while trying to protect the Emperor. The irony wasn't lost on Lyria. "Where's General Thrain?" the Emperor demanded. "Where is my military commander?" One of the guards looked uncomfortable. "Sire, we believe General Thrain is leading the insurgents. This was a coup attempt." Sire." The Emperor's face went dark with rage. But before he could speak, more news arrived. A group of insurgents had escaped the palace, taking hostages, including Princess Kessa. Lyria felt the world tilt. Her sister, her annoying, superior, beloved sister. "Where did they take her?" Jake asked. The guard commander, a woman named Serena, answered. "An old military installation in the northern mountains. It's heavily fortified. We're organizing an assault, but it will take time to do it properly. 3 days, maybe 4, to gather sufficient forces and plan the operation." 3 days. Jake repeated quietly. "That's too long." 2. "It's the best we can do without massive casualties," Serena said. "These are trained soldiers in a defensive position." Jake looked at the Emperor. "Sire, I request permission to contact my ship." "For what purpose?" "To get my sister back," Lyria said, understanding suddenly. The Emperor studied Jake. "You're a diplomat." "I used to be something else," Jake said, "and I'm good at it." Amy arrived then, along with Kyle and the rest of the human delegation. She took one look at Jake and seemed to understand immediately. "You're going after her," she said. Yes. You need a team. The ship has people. Amy activated her comm. Captain Park. This is Cultural Attaché Chen. Put me through to Commander Cole. On the screen, a scarred man with gray hair appeared. He looked at Jake and grinned. Well, well. Didn't think I'd ever see you in action again. Boss. Ryan, Jake said. I need a team. Small, fast, and quiet. Can you do it? For you? I'll have 6 of our best ready in 2 hours. Jake explained the situation quickly and efficiently. Ryan nodded as he listened. Already planning. We can do this, he said. But it'll be risky. I know. After the comm closed, Lyria grabbed Jake's arm. You don't have to do this. Let the Valerian military handle it. In 3 or 4 days, Jake said. What do you think happens to Kessa in 3 or 4 days? These people tried to kill your father. They're not going to treat her well. You could die. Maybe, Jake said. But I won't leave her there. Lyria looked at this man she had married, this human she had dismissed as weak and harmless. She saw him clearly now. Saw the warrior hidden beneath the diplomat's smile. Saw the fierce protectiveness in his eyes. Why? Jake's expression softened. Because she's your sister. Because she's family. Even if she doesn't think of me that way. And because I've spent 10 years trying to be someone other than a soldier. He turned to the Emperor. Sire, I need authorization to launch this operation. Officially, it will be a human military action, not a Valerian one. If it fails, you can claim you had no knowledge of it. The Emperor looked at his daughter, then back at Jake. You have my authorization. Bring Kessa home. I will. As Jake left to prepare, Lyria stood in the throne room, surrounded by her people. The palace was damaged, nobles were dead, and her sister was in terrible danger. And the only hope she had was a human diplomat who had spent 6 months letting everyone believe he was harmless. Her father approached her. Did you know? He asked quietly. About what he was? No. Lyria said. I thought he was weak. I thought he was nothing. And now? Lyria watched through the window as Jake walked across the courtyard toward the landing pad where the human shuttle waited. He moved with purpose now, no longer hiding what he was. Now I think I married someone extraordinary, she said. And I was too blind to see it. The human shuttle was small and fast, built for quick insertions rather than comfort. Jake sat with 6 other humans, all of them former special operations soldiers who had retired to easier lives. Until tonight. Ryan Cole sat across from him, checking his weapons with practiced ease. Just like old times, boss. Let's hope not, Jake said. Old times usually meant something went wrong. The other soldiers chuckled. They were good people, Jake knew. He had served with most of them during the border conflicts before the treaty. They had faced impossible odds and survived through skill and teamwork. Target is a military installation built into the mountain, Jake said, pulling up a holographic map. 3 levels, reinforced walls, automated defenses. Intelligence says approximately 40 insurgents. All trained Valerian soldiers. And we're 7 humans, one of the soldiers said. Her name was Lisa Park, the ship's captain, who had volunteered to come down. I like those odds. We're not here to fight 40 soldiers, Jake said. We're here to get the princess out alive. Fast, quiet, and gone. Before they know what happened. They studied the plans. The installation had been decommissioned years ago, but most of its systems were still functional. There was a maintenance tunnel that accessed the lowest level, designed for repair drones. That's our entry point, Jake said. We go in, locate the princess, and extract. If we're lucky, we're out before they even know we're there. And if we're not lucky? Ryan asked. Jake's expression hardened. Then we make sure they regret taking her. The shuttle dropped them 5 kilometers from the installation. They moved through the darkness in complete silence, using night vision to navigate the rocky terrain. The mountain loomed above them, dark and forbidding. They found the maintenance tunnel exactly where the plans showed it would be. The door was locked, but Lisa had brought cutting equipment. Within minutes, they were inside. The tunnel was narrow and dark, barely wide enough for a human, certainly too small for a Valerian. It led deep into the mountain, past power conduits and water pipes. Jake led the way, his weapon ready. They emerged on the lowest level. Empty storage rooms and abandoned equipment. No guards. Jake signaled the team to spread out and search for stairs or elevators. Ryan found the access shaft. "This leads up to the detention level," he whispered. "According to the plans, that's 2 levels up." They climbed in silence. Jake's heart was steady, his breathing controlled. This was familiar territory. He had done this kind of operation dozens of times. The diplomatic life had been an attempt to leave this behind, but some skills you never lost. The detention level was guarded. 2 soldiers stood outside a heavy door, looking bored. They never saw Jake and Ryan coming. A few seconds later, both guards were unconscious, their weapons taken. Behind the door was a corridor with cells. And in the 3rd cell, they found Princess Kessa. She looked bad. Her face was bruised, and she was sitting against the wall with her eyes closed. But she was alive. Jake unlocked the cell quietly. Kessa's eyes opened, and she stared at him in confusion. "You," she whispered. "The human. The human. We're getting you out of here," Jake said. "Can you walk?" "I think so." She stood up, wincing. "Why did you come?" "Because you're family," Jake said simply. "Now stay quiet and stay close." They made it back to the access shaft without incident. Jake was beginning to think they might actually pull off the silent extraction. Then, alarms began to wail. "They found the guards," Ryan said. "We need to move." They ran for the maintenance tunnel, but soldiers were pouring into the corridors now. Jake's team took defensive positions, buying time for Kessa to reach the tunnel. The firefight was brief but intense. Human weapons were louder than Valerian ones, the sharp crack of gunfire echoing through the installation. Jake's team moved with precision, covering each other, falling back in controlled stages. They reached the tunnel entrance. Lisa and 3 others got Kessa through and started back toward the exit. Jake and Ryan stayed behind to cover their retreat. That's when General Thrain appeared. He was enormous, even for a Valerian. And he carried a massive rifle that looked like it could punch through armor. His eyes found Jake, and he smiled. "The human prince," he said. "I was hoping to meet you. They say you're a diplomat. They say you're harmless." "I used to be a lot of things," Jake said. "Right now, I'm just someone who wants to leave. Let us go, General. And we can all walk away." "I don't think so," Thrain said. "Killing you will send a message that humans are weak, that the treaty was a mistake." He fired, and Jake dove behind cover. Ryan returned fire, but Thrain's armor absorbed the shots. The general advanced, laughing. "Is this the best humanity can offer?" he shouted. "Cowards, hiding behind machines?" Jake checked his ammunition. Low. The tunnel was 30 meters behind them. If they ran, Thrain would shoot them in the back. If they stayed, they would eventually run out of ammunition. So Jake made a choice. He stood up and dropped his weapon. "Ryan, get to the tunnel," he said quietly. "Boss, you can't. That's an order." Jake's voice had the tone that had once commanded 100 soldiers. Ryan hesitated, then nodded, and ran for the tunnel. Thrain watched him go, then turned back to Jake. "Surrendering? How disappointing." "Not surrendering," Jake said. "Just making it fair." He drew the Valerian sword he had taken from Lyria's quarters, the one he had used to kill the insurgents in the palace. Thrain laughed and drew his own blade, a massive thing that looked more like a piece of steel than a weapon. They circled each other. Thrain was bigger, stronger, and had reach advantage. But Jake had fought bigger opponents before. The general attacked first, a powerful overhead strike that would have split Jake in half if it had connected. Jake sidestepped and countered, his blade drawing a line across Thrain's armor. They fought through the corridor, blade against blade. Thrain was skilled, trained in traditional Valyrian combat, but Jake had learned from a dozen different species, and he combined techniques in ways that confused the larger warrior. Blood ran from cuts on both of them. Jake was slower, tiring. Thrain was bleeding more, but seemed not to care. "You fight well for a human," Thrain admitted, "but you're dying. I can see it in your eyes." "Maybe," Jake said, "but I held you here long enough." Thrain frowned, then heard the explosion. The charges Jake's team had placed were destroying the installation's power core. The lights went out, emergency systems activated, and warning sirens began to wail. In the confusion, Jake struck. Not a killing blow, but one that cut deep into Thrain's sword arm. The general's weapon fell, and Jake had his blade at the Valyrian's throat. "You were right," Jake said quietly. "I am dying. We all are. Every day. But I'm not dead yet. And you're not killing any more people today." He could have killed Thrain. Part of him wanted to. But instead, he knocked the general unconscious and ran for the tunnel. His team was waiting at the entrance, ready to collapse it behind him. Jake stumbled out just as the tunnel began to fail. They ran through the night, and behind them, the installation burned. On the shuttle back to the palace, Kessa sat across from Jake. He was bandaged and exhausted, his diplomatic mask completely gone. "Why didn't you kill him?" she asked. "Thrain, you had the chance." "Because I came here to build peace," Jake said. "Killing should always be the last option, not the first. Even when they deserve it, especially then." He looked at her. "Your sister is waiting for you." She was very worried. "Eat." Kessa was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "For how I treated you. For what I said at the wedding. I thought you were nothing." "I know what you thought," Jake said. "Most people do. It's easier that way. Easier to be underestimated. Easier to be kind when people expect you to be weak. Harder to be kind when they know you can hurt them." Jake closed his eyes. "I spent 10 years being a weapon. I came here to be something else. But tonight, I had to be both." They landed at the palace to find Lyria waiting. She ran to Kessa, holding her sister tightly. Then, she turned to Jake. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you for bringing her back." "You're welcome," Jake said simply. Over the next few days, the coup attempt fell apart. Without Thrain and the installation, the insurgents surrendered. The Emperor declared a new era of cooperation with humanity, pointing to Jake's rescue as proof of human honor and courage. But Jake didn't attend the ceremonies. He stayed in his rooms, recovering from his wounds, and trying to find his balance again. Being a soldier had been easier than being a diplomat. You knew who the enemy was and what needed to be done. Lyria found him on his balcony one evening, watching the sunset. "You've been avoiding me," she said. "No, just thinking." "About what?" "About who I am," Jake said. "I came here to leave the soldier behind. To be just a diplomat, just a bridge between our peoples. But it turns out you can't leave parts of yourself behind. They're always there, waiting." Lyria sat beside him. "I owe you an apology," she said. "For 6 months, I looked at you and saw nothing. I saw someone weak and harmless. And beneath me, I was wrong." "You weren't entirely wrong," Jake said. "I am harmless. To people who don't threaten those I care about. And to people who do?" Jake's expression darkened for just a moment. They sat in silence, watching the alien sun paint the sky in colors that didn't exist on Earth. Finally, Lyria spoke. "My father wants to make you a full member of the royal court. Give you real authority, not just a ceremonial title." "I don't want authority," Jake said. I just want to do my job, which is building peace, building understanding. He looked at her. Maybe building a real marriage, if you're willing to try. Lyria smiled. I think I'd like that. Though I have to admit, I'm a little afraid of you now. Good, Jake said. Fear keeps you honest, but you don't have to be afraid. I would never hurt you. I know. She took his hand. The first time she had voluntarily touched him. Kessa told me what you said. About killing being the last option. Do you really believe that? I marted round. Yes. Violence is easy. Any fool can destroy. Building something that lasts, that's hard. That takes real strength. He squeezed her hand gently. I've destroyed enough for one lifetime. I'd rather build something now. Then let's build, Lyria said. Together. 3 months later, the palace had been repaired, and life had returned to normal. But things had changed between Jake and Lyria. They had dinner together every evening now, talking about everything and nothing. She taught him Valerian poetry, and he taught her earth music. One night, as they sat together on the balcony, Lyria said, You know what I think is the most dangerous thing about you? What? Not that you can fight, not that you can kill, but that you choose not to. She looked at him seriously. You have all that power, all that skill, and you keep it locked away. That kind of control is terrifying. Is that a compliment? Jake asked, smiling. I think so. I'm still figuring you out. Take your time, Jake said. We have years, and for the first time since they had married, that felt like a promise rather than a sentence. The alien princess had finally seen her human husband for who he really was. Not harmless, but choosing to be gentle. Not weak, but strong enough to be kind. And that made all the difference.